I'll be back in 1 second. I'll be listening.
Yeah, no worries.
Hola, hola, ¿cómo están?
Hola.
Hola, hola, buenas tardes.
Todo bien.
Listos
Listos para.
Roberto.
Rich fue a hacerse un té porque le arde mucho la garganta.
Ay, sí, cierto, anda bien malo en la garganta, a ver cómo le va con su curso.
Sí.
¿Qué onda, Pablo? Hey, Rich, how you feeling?
Let me talk, please. I'm gonna record the session so you can have access later on. Is that okay for everybody? Good.
¿Qué onda, Arturo? Hola, hola, ¿cómo están? Muchas gracias nuevamente a los que están asistiendo a casi todos los cursos que estamos dando y a los nuevos también. Bienvenidos. Les presento a uno de mis grandes hermanos amigos de la industria, Rich Viso, que también es colaborador y socio en muchas aventuras que tenemos en la industria de los videojuegos. Tiene mucha experiencia, es alguien que es súper agradable en su trato y siempre muy dispuesto a ayudar a todo el mundo. Así como todos los conferencistas que le estamos presentando, por favor, háganlo su amigo, pregúntenle, moléstenlo, hagan que los ayude para poder hacer mejores videojuegos. Y bueno, a Bricia ya la conocen, ella va a estar ahí manejando toda la evidencia y contestando algunas preguntas técnicas que se requieran. Y pues sin mucho más que decir, Bricia, si quieres dar algunas palabras para que ya empiece Rich a dar su curso.
Ok, muchas gracias por estar ahora en este curso. Les agradecería mucho si no les están llegando las invitaciones, me puedan mandar correo. Les voy a escribir acá en el chat porque sé que ayer algunas personas tuvieron que mandar la liga. No sé por qué está pasando esto, ya van varias personas que me comentan, pero igual yo checo y les mando ahí la invitación nuevamente. Muchas gracias.
Bueno, yo los dejo. Rich, the stage is yours. Good luck with your voice.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Oh,
We'll do our best.
Nos vemos. Bye.
Bye.
Hey, everybody. As I said, I'm Rich Bisso. Very nice to see y'all. I do have a very, very raspy and sore throat today, so I'm going to do my best to hobble through this thing. I'm going to also try to mute myself if I have to cough, which is pretty often, unfortunately. But hopefully we'll be better by the time the next course rolls around. I'm also teaching a course called Managing Technical Teams in Video Game Development, or it's gone by a couple different names, but that's more for like managing teams of programmers or people in tech. But I really want to thank you for joining the course. I really appreciate you being here. And I'm hoping that we can all work together to explore the theme of managing teams in video game development. This course is going to be, oh yeah, no problem. That's absolutely fine. Also, I do speak a bunch of Spanish, so if you want to ask me questions in Spanish, I will absolutely do my best to answer you, even though the answers will probably be in English, just so I'm 100% clear and not stumbling. I understand a lot more than I speak, so so that's fine. But yeah, so this course is going to be for kind of all levels. I'm relying on you guys to kind of guide me in a lot of ways. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. My wife brought me tea. Isn't that nice? She's awesome. So it's going to be kind of set for the basics, right? Like when I go back and I take a course that is going to help me with my professional development, it isn't because I don't know anything about that thing, right? But what I want to do is I want to make sure that I have a firm footing in everything that I have. So you'll pardon me if a lot of this goes over stuff that you think you already know. But to be clear, I'm not going to skip over that stuff because I think it's if it's worth hearing once, it's worth hearing twice, right? So, but that being said, I'm going to ask you all to participate with me as much as possible so I can mold the course as we go along in trying to meet the needs that you have and answer your specific questions. So before we get to all that stuff, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Rich Bisso. I've been making video games for 25 years now, which is, it's over half my life I've been making video games, which is pretty insane. Started in the year 2000, moved out here. It's pretty good, but I do know some people who have been doing it on the outside of like 40 years now, which is pretty insane. I know a guy named Tony Barnes, who I think was the first Black guy to ever make video games, and he has been doing it ever since he was actually a kid. He was like 13 or 14 years old, making games for the Atari 2600, which is pretty insane. But yeah, I remember the day when I was the youngest person in the company, which was really long ago. So what did I do? I went to school in Washington, D.C. for diplomacy and foreign service. And I decided I didn't want to do that. And I didn't want to become a lawyer, and I didn't want to get into finance. I wanted to do something that I really enjoyed and that I would have fun doing, and that I would be able to help give back to people and help them have a good time in their lives. And one of my friends mentioned that they were thinking about coming out to Los Angeles, which is where I live, to get into video games. So I said, oh, that sounds amazing. Let me hop on that wagon, and came out to Los Angeles, worked in IT for a little bit, but eventually ended up getting a job in video games as a producer because I don't really have any other skills. Like I couldn't program, I couldn't do art, like I didn't know anything at that point. So they're like, okay, but you're smart and you can organize. So I became a producer right off the bat, associate producer. So eventually throughout my career, I ended up working at places like Treyarch, which is now owned by Activision. I worked on Spider-Man games for a long time, including Spider-Man, the very end of Spider-Man 1 for PlayStation 1, I think, Spider-Man 2 for PlayStation 2, 3 Ultimate, and I think that's it for mainline Spider-Man games. Incredible Hulk, moved to Texas for a little while, came back, worked for Sony Pictures Studios, and then I was a game designer on pretty much all those games. Did some production stuff, essentially ran 3/4 of the team on the Incredible Hulk game, and then ended up coming back and getting a job at Sony Pictures as a programmer. And during the time when I was a game designer, our game design was always very hands-on. So I ended up becoming a essentially programmer without really even knowing it, because our scripting for our engine was just very, very complex. It was object-oriented, had memory management, the whole 9 yards. So it was really crazy, and basically prepared me to become a programmer, which I was for Sony Pictures. Started up our own kind of like little game company within Sony Pictures, did stuff for PlayStation Home, made our own games for like cross-platform games. And then I left there to go start my own company, which is Hyperkinetic Studios. And I also own with Ugo a company called BC Media Lab. Hyperkinetic's been around for about 11 years now. We've done all sorts of stuff. We've won Emmys. We've won PAX. We've won several other game awards throughout that time. So, just really just trying to do projects that we're interested in and that we think are really fun But during that time, and since kind of, I would say, the end of my time at Treyarch, I really focused on what it takes to lead and organize and make successful a video game development team, and the process that the team partakes in while making video games. So I think a lot about it, and the reasons why I think a lot about that is because essentially two things. Number one, I want to make good games, right? I want to make games that are fun, that actually ship. I want to make games that people are gonna, pick up and have a good time with. And kind of subsequent to one is that I really I really care a lot about the people that are working for me on my teams, and about, in general, the people that are working in video games. And I noticed when I was working at Treyarch that it was horribly inefficient the way that we went about making video games. You would think that there are these big companies, they're going to be really awesome at making games, and they're going to really have their systems and their techniques down pat, and they don't. To this day, they don't. You've all heard the horror stories of all these companies who are forcing their people to work, like 24 hours a day, 7-8 days a week, or whatever. And that's because video game production and the science of organizing video game development is just not something that people pay attention to. When you see courses on video game development at schools, they barely have anything about producing video games or running a video game team. It's just not something they pay attention to, right? So while I was at Treyarch, I just saw so many people who had families, had lives they should have had outside of game development, didn't get to have those lives because of basic mistakes that were made in the way that they organized their teams, right? And guys, this is not, I guess, folks, this is not something that is just particular to video games. This is something that happens across all sorts of industries. So this learning that you're going to be doing here is going to be relevant to everywhere you go, and every type of creative or otherwise endeavor that you get into. With movies, it was like they were making movies for something like 60 years before they actually started focusing on, okay, but how are these teams organized, and can we do this better, and can we make it more efficient, and can we make it something that that is more effective, make a video game team more effective. So we're going to start, like I said, from the basics, and we're going to build up from there and try to, I'm going to try to get across some of some of the lessons that I've learned while I was making games. And the reason why I'm excited for teaching this is because I want you to catch on to that, right? I want you to bring the learning that I'm imparting to you here, to your own teams and to other people, so that we keep saving all these hours that get wasted, where people don't get to spend time in their own lives, where people don't get to spend time with their families, and not only bring those hours back to them, but make the hours that you're using while you're making video games a lot more efficient and effective, right? So that's what's going on. Let's talk about, did y'all get the course syllabus? Is that something that everybody got?
I didn't.
No, you need to share it, and when you go through it, then they can access it.
Okay. Is it, Brisha, rather than me doing that right now, is it possible for you to kind of share the document that I shared with you out with everybody or whatever?
To share it through my screen?
No, I mean more like give them access to it or somehow or whatever.
Oh, how can we?
I mean, it doesn't have to happen right now.
Okay. Yeah.
But just eventually, everybody should have the syllabus. I appreciate that.
It would be nice if you could just show it, and that's what Hugo did. He showed the whole course.
Okay. All right. Well,
If you can help, what else I can do what you asked me to.
yeah, that's fine. I think we should also send it out to everybody as well.
Yes, I'm gonna do it.
Okay. Let me see if I can find it here and put it up on the board.
I have it on hand. That's why I'm telling you.
Oh, do you? Oh, yeah. Go for it. Then you can share the screen then.
Yeah. Give me 1 second.
Yep. So basically, to continue, what we're going to do, the syllabus is basically, I don't know if any of you all had, if all of you have had to deal with syllabi before, but basically the syllabus kind of lays out a rough estimation of what we're going to be doing in the class, what we hope to achieve, and what each week should look like. Like I said, depending on feedback from everybody, I might end up modifying that, or depending on, how my mind changes as we go throughout this. Again, that's your first lesson in game development, is that you should always be dynamic, right? Remain dynamic, because nothing's going to be like you think it is. And we have to be like water when we're flowing through life. Because if we stop to argue with every single rock, then we'll never get anywhere. All right. So yeah, basically, that's the wrong one. That's for the other class. Okay, we could continue. So basically, the idea with this class is that we're going to give you all the skills you need to effectively manage and lead teams. We're going to explore all the different themes behind that behind the idea of project management, how teams interact with each other, how people communicate with one another, what it means to be a leader, and what happens there. Yeah, that's the one. And how to resolve conflicts amongst your teams, and all the while remembering that, like I said before, video game development is a dynamic endeavor. It is not getting in there and making widgets on a factory line. Who in here, by show of hands, and I think there's a little hand raise thing down here at the bottom of your meeting. Who in here, by show of hands, is actually an active video game developer?
So we have Roberto.
Yeah, leave them up. Whether it's on your own or whether it's, okay. So feels like there's a bunch of people in here who are not actually active video game developers, which is good to know. Again, I exist in a dynamic environment, so I'm going to modify my approach and my strategy based on that. Okay. So for those of you who are not actually active video game developers, I think, again, this is going to be a good prep for when you do become a game developer. And I don't mean paid. I mean, you can be working on your own individual stuff, and all these principles still apply. But okay, so of all the game developers that we just talked to, I want you to raise your hand if maybe like 2-3 days that you have in your development life are like the same in a row. Does anybody ever have the same day twice in a row? You do? Well, that's really interesting, because I literally never have the same day that I have ever had, ever, when I'm making video games. Like, I wake up and I have no idea what is coming for me. So I think of all the different things all the different industries I've heard about, this, aside from maybe like service industry, right? It feels like there's more dynamic. It's a more dynamic environment than any other type of industry that you can encounter. So basically, you never know what's coming. The tech stack is always changing. User input is always changing, because it's kind of a service industry now, right? So you're always having to change and remain dynamic. And so it's kind of, I think, unique in that way, or at least fairly unique in that you're going to have to manage a team that is meeting that type of environment. So that's one of the things that we're going to deal with during this course. Yeah, so I think that if you're coming out of this course, even though it's very, very short comparatively, and you're not going to be running into a whole bunch of, or we're not going to be able to get in depth into too much of this stuff, although I'm, like they said, more than happy to sidebar with you outside of this environment here. By the way, if I use words that don't make sense to you, or they're new words to you, I am more than happy. I'm more than okay if you stop the class and allow me to kind of explain what I'm talking about. So, like with sidebar, I just realized that it might not be something that is like, might be very particular to American English. I'm not exactly sure. But yeah, I'm just saying, like, take me aside, and I'm more than happy to go off on any of these subjects with y'all. And yeah, I mean, kind of like that's my approach with just about everything, is that, I have a very interactive approach to teaching. So I would call it interrupt driven. If you really want to, if you have a question or there's something you need, just raise your hand and I'm more than happy to stop and talk with you. I definitely don't have a pre-written out kind of script that I'm going through, so don't worry about interrupting me if you have questions or there's something interesting. Daniel, is there something you need, or did you just forget to take your hand off? Okay. Perfect. Oh, don't be sorry. Don't be sorry. It happens. So yeah, this course, basically we're going to be doing 8 hours worth of course. This is going to be a 1 hour a week, 8 weeks course. Marisha, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong about any of that, but I believe that's the case. And we'll go through a real quick summary of what it is that we're going to be, the different course topics that we're going to be heading, and we can follow along on that syllabus if you want. So number one, week one, we're going to be doing this introduction, and then we're going to be doing foundations, talking about the foundations of team management. Week two, we're going to be talking about project planning and project management. We're going to be talking week three about leadership in game development, and that is a big topic. So we're going to split that up into 2 parts. The first part, we're going to talk about leadership approaches and kind of team morale. Part 2, we're going to be talking about conflict management and problem solving in leadership. Week 5, we're going to be talking about managing creative teams and the unique challenges that come with that, rather than like, managing folks at a factory or something. Yeah, because it's different. Disculpe. Week 6, we're going to be talking about managing scope and expectations. Week 7, we're going to be talking about case studies and practical insights. Week 8, we're going to be talking about final review and questions and answers, doing a larger kind of wind down session. Okay. All right. Okay, so that is what we're going to be up to for all those weeks. Let's see. So the objectives of what we're going to be talking about today, again, is kind of cut a little bit short because of the fact that we had to do all these intros and kind of set up. We're going to be talking about understanding team roles and dynamics in video game development, and just doing kind of an overview of effective communication strategies. Yeah, and like I said before, the way we'll run the class is that any of you should feel free to stop me at any point and ask me questions, and we'll take care of them in quick order. Okay. So give me a second here. I'm gonna blow my nose. Again, for those of you who are new to the class, I just have wicked allergies because of the fires that are going on up here. I'm not complaining at all. A lot of people I know lost their houses and everything, so I'm just glad that I'm still here. But yeah, thanks for bearing with me while I'm struggling through this here. Okay, so before we begin, I'm going to ask you questions from time to time. So I just want to see who actually is here so I can get an idea of like what's happening in terms of like the questions and surveys and stuff that we do. So if you are actually here and present, please raise your hand. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, cool. You can put them down. Thanks. Okay. Yeah, I've taught online classes before, so I know what goes on, everybody. This yeah, this is for y'all. This is for y'all. If you want to pay attention, and this is how I am, by the way. I am kind of a no BS type of person, so I am not going to give you a hard time for not paying attention or doing what you got to do. I am 100% in on that. Log on, go the hell off or whatever. Do whatever you want to do. What I'm trying to get across to you here is meant to help you. It's not meant to help me. So if you're paying attention, if you're participating, I'm glad. And if you're not, I'm also glad for you. All right, let's get going. So a lot of people here, like we were talking about, probably are not active game developers. I'm not going to assume everybody is an active game developer. So I'll try to structure what I'm talking about in relation to the being respectful to the fact that not everybody is a video game developer. So some of this might get a bit basic for those of you who are, but I think it's always good to get principles reinforced. Anybody here, go ahead and throw out the roles that exist on video game development teams, please. Just throw them into chat. Great, perfect. The question is, what are some roles that exist on a video game team, a video game development team? Okay. 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 All right. Okay. All right. All right. Yeah. Perfect. Good. Oh, somebody threw in producer. What's CM? Roberto. Oh, community manager. Perfect. Slava, what did you mean by VG generalist, video game generalist? Perfect. That's good. I think we got most of them. I appreciate it. Oh, okay. So they have no specific specialization. They're just doing everything they can. Maybe wearing different hats, right? Is a way that we would put that, right? It's a person who is just doing all sorts of different things, kind of whatever they need to be able to make the game happen. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Good job, everybody. Those, I think, hit most of it. We have game designers, we have producers, we have programmers, we have artists, QA, people who study history. Okay, cool. We have, all the people who handle the business aspects of everything that goes on. We have the specific, we have the sound people. We have all the kind of different specific types of artists, psychologists. You know what? It is actually true that some video game companies are big enough to have psychologists. And hopefully for us that those psychologists are just the ones trying to figure out player psychology and not the ones that are having to undo emotional damage from the development process, right?
We need it for that too.
What's that?
I think it's necessary for the crunch and the burnout and all of that happens.
Right? How horrible. How are we to one another, right? That we got to have a psychologist. How about just not do that? How about just not do everything you can so you don't F people up, man?
That's why you're here, Rich, to teach.
That's exactly right. Right, because it's okay. So I think the thing that underpins everything here is I give a shit about people, right? I care about how people live, and that's from an altruistic point of view, but it's also from a very practical point of view, because healthy, happy people are more productive and they make better video games, everybody, right? So you don't have to just justify this from being a touchy-feely person. It is a very practical approach, is trying to keep your people happy and healthy, and that will lead to them being more effective as video game developers, right? So would you say, as a whole, who here would say, this is an interesting, I think, and telling question, right? I want you to raise your hand if you're a person who's just working on a video game team. Let's say you're a designer, and let's say you need an art asset from somebody, and there's no right or wrong answer to this. Let's say you need an art asset from some artist. Who thinks that the only way you should log that request is by talking to a producer, and there's nobody else that you should be talking to or bothering, or however you want to put it? So again, raise your hand if you think that the only way you should be communicating when you need something from somebody is through a producer that is on the team. If that's what you think, raise your hand. And again, there's no wrong answer to this. It is just a different way of thinking, right? Yeah, I'm assuming you can't do this thing, right? Like if I'm a game designer and I can't, that's what a team is for, right? The team is there so that people help each other out, and that, you don't get taken off tasks by doing things that you don't want to do. Okay, so Fernando says, yeah, if you got something you need, go through the producer. Okay, so this is very interesting, right? And I think this is one of those difficult things in running a video game team, is like how much do we clamp down on people bugging each other in a process, or how much is that a good thing? I know my co-founder for Hyperkinetic, Tomo, will tell you a very, very specific thing with that. I'll tell you a story about this. It was one of my first days at Treyarch, and I had gotten hired on by Tomo, who's creative director, basically running the team. And I was sitting there kind of waiting for an art asset from somebody for this kind of test that I was doing, for being a new designer or whatever. And he came over and he goes, "Oh, how's it going?" And I said, yeah, I'm waiting for this animation from the art team, from the animators, so that I can do this open city, mission type of thing that I was trying to make. And he goes, hey, I'll show you how that's done. And he goes, stand up, right? And I stood up, and he goes, follow me. And he brings me over to the animator's office, right? And he goes, hey, Jim, this is Rich. Jim Zachary was his name. He goes, hey, Rich. He goes, Rich, you're waiting for? And he goes, and I said, well, this, and this. And he goes, oh, yeah, I can do that for you, right? Now imagine I was waiting for that thing for a day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, 6 days, right? That means I'm not moving forward on my project while I'm waiting for this person to do this thing, when I could just stand up and go over to that person's desk and say, hey, I need this thing, right? So again, I like to look at things from all different angles. And that's the way we did things on Spider-Man, because we had a super weak production department. Our production department was not effective at all. They basically just ordered lunches and make sure people were, to work on time. And they did, they organized translations and stuff. They didn't do what we would normally think of as production facilitation. So can somebody critique Tomo's approach in that, just to get an idea of what you all think? What could possibly be bad about Tomo's approach, where he just had me stand up and go directly over to the person that I was supposed to be getting that asset from, and ask them to do it and tell them about it? I really appreciate that. Thank you. Can somebody? Okay, so this is a very good point, right? So if you have a team in which the schedule is very tightly managed, right? And if I don't involve a producer in that discussion, whether or not I get up and go and talk to that person directly at their desk, if I don't involve a producer in that discussion, then that means that there's unknown. Okay, we'll talk about the permission thing, right? Because I feel pretty strongly about this. But if I go up, if there's a very tightly controlled production environment, and I get up out of my seat and I go talk directly to somebody, and I bring them off of their schedule that they're supposed to be on, then I'm screwing up the whole schedule. I'm introducing unknowns that might not get found, that might cause other problems that I don't understand later on down the line, right? Unfortunately, this was not a well-run production machine, so I probably would have been sitting there for days before anybody even knew that I was supposed to have that item. Now, the place where I'd worked before, they were like, never, ever talk to anybody ever that isn't a producer, or else you're going to be in trouble, right? And you don't have permission to talk to anybody about that. Now, I feel very strongly about this. I feel that is absolutely the wrong way to work. I feel that inside of it, yeah, it was a terrible game company. Now, I feel that inside of companies, every situation is different every day, and that people should do what they're going to do, but production should be involved insofar as is possible. And I place the onus for making that stuff happen more on production than I do on you, right? Like if I'm sitting at my desk every day and I don't know, and I'm waiting for this asset to come through, I'm not doing anything, that's obviously bad, right? So if I don't have a production person that I can go to, or that's not part of my tradition, then maybe it's the right thing to go to that person, right? Again, a dynamic environment calls for dynamic response to situations, right? What I would do if I were in that situation is I would go and talk to that person, but I would also involve a production person and let them know that that's happening, so that can be reflected in the schedule. Anyways, it's just kind of a way that all these different roles interconnect and depend on each other, because it is. And this is where all the problems happen in video games. This is why you see games that are a year late, that have like 300 people working on a team, 400 up to 1,000 people working on the team. And you might be like, nah, that can't be true. It's just that, they want to make the game better. No, the reason why it happens is because somebody's sitting at their desk for 7 days, not working on things that they should be working on, because nobody's keeping track of what's going on, and nobody has let somebody else know that this person's waiting for something. So, there's just, that's one of a myriad of ways that our roles interconnect in games. And I feel that production, which is another thing that really isn't taught too well, and we're going to teach a little bit of that in this course, can help make it so that things flow smoothly, right? So that the trains run on time. And so that the people who run the project actually have a good understanding of what's going on with everything, so they can make good decisions ahead of time, so that they don't have to make everybody crunch. Because as a boss, as a person that is managing a video game team, if your people are crunching, you have failed. It's not them that has failed. It is you that has failed. You have failed everybody on your team if you make them crunch. There is nothing awesome. There is nothing macho about fucking having to crunch. There is nothing cool about it. You are taking people away from, and yeah, that's a lot of what goes on, is that everybody's, a lot of people down here, or a lot of people in the industry are, you have failed as a producer, as a team leader, right? Because this is what this course is about. It's about managing your team, right? And if your people are having to work overtime for any reason, that is because you have failed somehow. So you got to not do that, right? Because you're taking hours out of those people's lives, and you're risking them becoming unhappy in either leaving your team or just creating a crappy video game, which is not what you want. So if there's one thing I can get through your head in this whole thing, well, let's say two things. It is, if there are failures on the team in video game development and you are the one leading the team, this is your failure, right? You have to take responsibility for everything that's going on. And if you don't know what's going on, you can't stop it from happening, right? It's like does anybody here, show of hands, who here plays real-time strategy games at all? Like Command and Conquer, Warcraft 3, Warhammer, any of these types of games? Okay, that's great. So a lot of people understand this concept where basically it is like your scouts, right? Everybody, if you're a beginning newbie player on RTS, you're going to think that these little scout units that are really fast and basically have no armor and basically don't really do much damage, if at all, you're going to think those are crappy units, right? If you're a new person at playing these games, and you're gonna bypass them to go to start building other units. And I think any person who is good at strategy games will tell you that this is a grave error, right? And why is that? Does anybody know? You gain more info. And why is info important? That way you can plan. And why is planning important? Info is power, but why is info is power?
Because it helps you to not to crunch.
Yes. Why does it help you not to crunch?
Because you can check the data and plan accordingly.
Okay, and what might the data tell you?
Oh, I love data because it does not lie.
Okay, so I think the gap that I'm trying to bridge here between, okay, you're not going to crunch and boom, you have more info, is that you cannot plan for things that you do not know about, right? You cannot plan for things that you don't know are coming down the pipe, right? So imagine, think about these wildfires, these horrendous wildfires that are happening up here in Los Angeles, right? Imagine if everybody knew 2 months ahead of time that, hey, there's going to be wildfires, we're going to get these crazy winds, and there's going to be wildfires. You know, maybe we wouldn't have prevented them entirely, but do you think they would have been as bad as they are now? Probably not, right? Because then you have everybody there who's ready to bring things in a different direction so that you're prepared for that wildfire when it hits, right? So that's what a schedule is, everybody. That's what a schedule is for. That's what it's for. It is to bring you information as a boss so that you can see things coming down the pipe and you can make changes that will help you avoid the fire, right? And the consequences of the fire. And this is the thing that people don't really, they get it, but they don't really get it. Because if you really got it, exactly, better strategists are those who know their environment. Let's bring it back to the RTS. If you are making, let's say the RTS is rock, paper, scissors, right? Everybody's heard of rock, paper, scissors. So let's say you don't do scouting and you're like, oh yeah, I'm a rock person. I'm just going to make a rock army, right? Rock army everywhere. Spend all my money on rock army. Rock army always wins. What if the enemy's making a paper army, right? Exactly. What if I don't know. I gotta watch The Simpsons. I still haven't watched it. They're on season 35, which is insane. But what if the enemy's making a paper army, right? If you would have known, if you would have used your scouts, you would have made a scissors army, right? To handle that paper army. But no, you made a rock army because you didn't bother scouting, because you don't know anything, because you're powerless without that information. And then the paper army just covered your butt up. And now you're dead. And now all your programmers quit. So yeah, so there's a whole bunch of reasons why we got to do this. We got to make sure as people who are running the teams that we are getting as much information as possible, that we are helping people to collaborate and understand where things are going wrong, right? So I'll give you another quick story. I know we're getting down to the time, but I think we're okay. I was running on Incredible Hulk. I was running a team where essentially I tried to put this into action, right? A lot of people talk about this stuff. A lot of people talk about being good producers and doing schedules and blah, 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 blah. Hardly anybody does it. Like, even if you think you do it, you probably do not do it well. Because that's just statistics right now. If you do, fantastic. That's awesome. I would recommend that you really talk to me about your scheduling processes to make sure that you're doing it the way you should be doing it. But I tried to put this into practice, and it ended up working fantastically. One story I got out of this was that, is there anybody here who does texture art, who makes textures or makes drawings or concept art? Raise your hand. Roberto.
I don't.
Okay. So of you people that just raised your hands, which of you works without some kind of tablet and stylus setup? You just use your mouse making your textures. Did anybody here do that?
What is the question?
Do you work with just your mouse?
Oh. In some case, I use my mouse. It depends if there's a vector image. I very useful use the mouse, and in some case, I use my tablet. It depends what is the task.
Yes. Okay. So for the vast majority of the time, though, if you're working with pixel art, right, with non-vector pixel art, you're using your stylus, right? Like, you're not trying to draw things with your mouse.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Imagine that you have this guy who, that was his sole job. He was the only person on the team making textures for 3D models with a mouse. Okay. Not good, right? This is a AAA game. And he is doing this. And the reason why is because he was too afraid to talk to anybody about it, right? So I started up, because he's a junior, like a low-level texture artist, right? And he doesn't want to bug anybody. Maybe he came from a place that was abusive, right? And he doesn't want to get in trouble for being a problem or whatever, right? You don't know what's going on in people's minds. People will, rather than bug you or bug anybody about it, they'll just try to find a way around the problem, and they'll work they'll work in a very, very bad manner in order to avoid bugging anybody. So what I did is I put this thing into practice where I had all my scouts, right? I've got all these scouts, and they had very low armor. Actually, no, they had normal human armor, but they had very low armor. They were very fast. I only gave them rubber bands to shoot people with. Whoops, they knocked my glasses off. I only gave them rubber bands to shoot people with and stuff. It was just like a scout in an RTS. And I sent them out. I sent them all over the team. And I said, hey, I want you to ask people, how's it going? How are you? Number 2, what is it you're working on? And number 3, can I get you anything, right? And as we go into the course, we'll see why these questions are super valuable. I thought a really long time about these questions before these are the questions that I had my little scouts ask everybody. So they come around to his desk, this when we first started doing this, and they said, hey, how are you? What are you working on? Do you need anything? And he's like, and they're like, no. Seriously, dude, if you need anything, I can help you out and get it. He's like, well, right now I'm making all my textures with this mouse, and it kind of sucks. And they go, what? And he goes, yeah. And he didn't want to bug anybody about it. So the producer, my scout, goes over to the art director of the studio art director, and they asked him if they could get a tablet, a Wacom tablet for the person, and the guy said no. And so they came back to me and they gave me this information, and I said, hey, did you try solving it? I'm like, what the hell is going on? The guy doesn't have a Wacom. They go, no. And I said, did you try solving it? And they said, we talked to the art director. What did he say? He said no. And I said, oh, wonderful. I love these type of situations. So I stood up and I went over to the desk of the art director, and I told him I told him a whole bunch of things, but suffice to say, I'll make a long story short. We ended up getting a Wacom tablet for this guy by the end of the day, because the art director was just misguided in the way that he was approaching the situation. Luckily, we didn't have to get anybody else involved, and I had some choice words for him that made him change his mind. But we ended up getting a Wacom tablet for this texture artist. And does anybody want to guess a number at like how much this person's performance and output improved? Like blank X. 100%. That's a good guess. Go ahead. Anybody else? Okay, it was 400%, everybody. It was 400%. This person's output improved by 400% because he was just used to using a Wacom tablet to make his stuff. And he's also very, very, very fast. And just think about that. At one person, asking them that one question, making sure everybody's talking to each other. The hand's health is a big thing too, right? Like, we care about our people. We don't want them to get messed up. He also came out of that feeling like he was being taken care of, right? So that person is now an ally to the cause of making good video games, right? But think about how many on a big team, how many of those, that's right, communication is the most important tool humans have. Think about how many times that happens on a large team. Imagine now a team that is 1,000+ people that is spread out over like 4 different studios, like some of the games are. Like, imagine how much of that wastage is going on. Imagine how many people's output could be boosted by so many times, right? And that's how we work together with each other to solve problems, right? Let's see. So we have to, somebody just said communication is, what exactly did you say? Communication is the most important tool humans have. Okay, yeah, that's absolutely true. So the idea here is the way that we run our teams and the way that we keep production running smoothly is what? Throw out some answers of things that you have learned here today. How do we keep our teams? How do we make better video games? What are some of the most important things for running a video game team? A good video game team. Go ahead, throw out some answers. Being interested in the needs of the team, that's fantastic. Anybody else? Trying to get all the same idea or goal, that's good. Communication, yep. Yeah, we're just summarizing. You can feel free to say stuff that we've already said. Yeah, so basically those things, right? Communication, avoid production crunch, right? If you have to crunch, that's your fault. And so the other thing that I would have to say, and I'll probably close up with this, is everybody is a resilience. Yes. Knowing the role of each worker. Yes, absolutely. So another thing that I'll close up with this is this. So since you're all initiated into this club of managers, the secret video game managers club that we all have right now, I'm going to tell you one last thing. And it is that, and we touched on this briefly, but at the end of the day, the responsibility lies with you. If you are ever sitting there blaming somebody about the failures that are happening on the team, this failure is having nothing to, everybody's like, oh, I want to be the boss. I want to be the boss. You might not want to be the boss once you realize this. Every failure that exists can be traced back to you as a leader, right? Because if failures happen, unless somebody's specifically and antagonistically going against you and hiding things from you and absolutely out to be a jerk to tank the team, which I'm going to tell you is like 1 in 100,000 people is going to do something stupid like that. It's not going to happen. Those failures can be traced back to you. And I forget who it was. It might have been Harry Truman, who was a president of the United States of America way back in the day. He had a plaque on his desk, and this always comes to my mind. Can anybody here tell me what the plaque on his desk said? No? It said, "The buck stops here." Does anybody know what that means? Okay, so we have a phrase in US English which is called passing the buck, right? And what that means is, I don't know why they use money as a buck is $1. I don't know why they use money for it, but it's basically passing the blame onto somebody else, where they go, oh, I could easily have gone, oh, this guy didn't have a mouse. Well, that's his fault. So he fucked everything up for our team because he didn't tell anybody that he needed a mouse, right? Or that he needed a Wacom tablet. And therefore, we didn't finish in time because he was running at 1/4 of his total productive capability. So that's his fault, right? No, it would be my fault, right? Because if you don't find out about it and you don't do anything about it, right? That's right. Then that's your fault, right? So that's why he had the thing that says the buck stops here, because people can pass the buck all day, all long, all night. They can pass the blame for failure to everybody else and pass it around. Usually bosses pass it down, right? But the reason why he had the buck stops here is because he's the end. Like he's the one to blame at the end of the day if things go wrong. Because if things go wrong, then he didn't do enough so to put himself in a situation that he could know about it and be able to fix it before it got to him, right? Right. So, yeah, so that's the thing at the end of the day. It's a tremendous responsibility, like Spider-Man says. Does anybody know what Spidey always says?
With great power comes great responsibility.
That's exactly right. You have a ton of power, but that is not a gift. That it can be a gift for the people that work for you, if you play your cards right. But at the end of the day, that's a responsibility. And that should be super heavy on your shoulders, right? Because the buck stops with you. At the end of the day, something goes wrong, you're to blame. Okay? So in the rest of the courses, we're going to end here. We're over time a little bit. But in the rest of the courses, we're going to talk about how you can deal with that, how you can take proactive action to make sure that you are able to meet your responsibilities head on and leave your team a very happy team that makes very, very good video games. Okay? All right. Thanks, everybody. If anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to stick around for a few minutes after this and answer those questions. Again, this class is going to be held on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Pacific time. And again, I'm more than happy to hang around and talk with y'all for a little bit.
Yeah. Can I please ask you to turn on your camera so I can take the evidence for the session? ¿Pueden prender, por favor, su cámara para tomar evidencia de la sesión? Voy a cerrar el traductor tantito, ¿no?
Hold on, I gotta do my hair.
Okay, do it now. Well, it was pretty
Done.
good for not having a voice. I like
Thank
it.
you very much. I appreciate it. I didn't cough as much as I thought I was gonna.
Because you were inspired, Richie. Okay, ¿están listos? Ya nadie más va a enseñar su angelical cara. Okay. Conste. Oh my God, con las manos juntas. Me encantas, Rich. Okay. Dance.
Okay. And like I said before, more than happy to stay after, answer questions. If your English isn't that great, that's okay. Again, I can listen to you in Spanish and answer in English. I have no problems with that as long as you can understand me. If you don't understand me, like I said, puedo tratar de hablar español un poco, pero mi español no es. Gracias, muy amable.
I already turned on the subtitles, don't worry.
All right, perfect.
Thank you.
Bad, the subtitles. I'm not even talking about watering.
They're terrible.
Yeah, they're terrible.
Oh. Ya estuvo.
En realidad sí es mexicano porque su esposa es mexicana.
Sí, mi esposa. Nos conocimos hace 25 años. Aquí en Los Ángeles. Sí.
Si alguien tiene una pregunta, por favor, levanten su mano.
And she still brings me tea, can you believe it?
Because she loves you, obviously.
Todavía.
Yeah, because you're a sweetheart, Rich. Fuente de amor. What the fuck?
Okay. All right, everybody. I don't want to keep you around for any longer than you got to be. Yeah, we'll start next week. There's a couple things I got to pick up from the last week that I wanted to talk to you about. Yeah, next week we jump into project planning and management.
So they're asking if you have any advice to divide.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. What was that?
They are asking if you have any advice on how to divide the workload between the team.
Yeah. Basically make sure people are working on things that are insofar as possible directly in their wheelhouse. Make sure that they have input. What I would do, I mean, if I had a larger team, what I would do is I would have a thing where just to be really short, and we're going to be going over this, I'm sure, throughout the course of the course. What I would do is basically anytime a design comes in from the design team, that design gets divided up by, first by production and into like, okay, let's say, hey, I'm going to need a monkey that attacks me or whatever, right? That's the design. That's an awesome game-winning design. Basically, I would sit down as a producer if I got that design. First of all, that's why I call it capturing requirements, right? I sit down and I say, okay, we got a new design that's coming in. It's a monkey. It's going to need sounds. It's going to need geometry. It's going to need, all the texture work you're going to need to do for it. It's going to need rigging. It's going to need animating. It's going to need concept art. It's going to need AI. It's going to need what else? What else would go right off the bat? Anyways, something like that, right? And then I have all these tasks, and then I sit down, because I'm a producer, I don't know everything, right? I sit down with all the department heads and I say, hey, we just got a new design. I broke it up into these tasks. Do these look like they're about right? And they go, oh, we're going to need something else, right? We're going to need, some physics work on it, or we're going to need some database. Like here's an actual one, right? We're going to need some sort of more information from design to be able to put data about this character, like how hard should its punches, or what kind of attack should it have? How hard should its punches be? These types of things. Then we go back and forth until we get a good list of all the requirements. And then I sit down with leads and I say, okay, who should be working on each of these individual tasks? We get names for every task. And then we sit down with the department lead and the individual who's supposed to be doing the work. And we say, hey, this is the new work that's coming on your plate. Don't worry about whether or not you have time to do it. Tell me how much time you think it would take you in an ideal world, actually, worst case scenario, to do this thing. And then they give you a bunch of estimates, the leads double checking that stuff. And then that's how the work gets broken up. In a smaller team, that has got to be who can do the work is how you divide it up, basically, and who has the least amount of stuff on their plate that isn't like mission critical stuff, right? For instance, if I'm an engine programmer on a small team of like 5 people, and I can do the work that goes like, okay, what kind of attacks do they have, and how much damage should each one do? That probably, if somebody else can do that work, that should probably go to them, right? So these are just, there's myriad situations where we can talk about like how does this stuff work, or how should it work. A lot of it's going to be particular to your situation, but those are some good guidelines, right? If you're on a big team, there needs to be a process to break that stuff down and make sure it goes into your living schedule. And if you're on a smaller team, it is giving that work to people who can actually do it without having to, learn from the ground up where that goes, if at all necessary, and then paying respect to things that are mission critical that only one person can get done, that absolutely must get done within a time limit, right? So it's just, a lot of it's using your common sense. Next question is, could you share your approach to effectively coordinating a remote game development team that is dispersed across different cities or time zones, ensuring smooth communication, collaboration, and productivity? That's a really nice question. I'm assuming you can't avoid this whole thing about getting everybody in the same time zone, which is fine. A lot of people, what they do is they like to have core hours that span across those zones, so there's at least a little overlap between the people that are on that team when they're available for talking and meetings and collaboration, communication, smooth communication. So I think that's a very basic step that you can take. I think the other one, again, it's going to be work intensive, and people don't necessarily like work intensive, but a lot of times that's the way that it has to be. Is that we are setting up meetings that make sense on a one-off basis to be able to make sure that things get done when they need to get done. It's not an option to not have communication, right? You know, I am a big fan insofar as is possible at using, you know how it used to be? I don't know. All y'all seem pretty young. So used to be the only thing we had was like call up somebody on the phone and talk to them. And then we had email. And then we had text, right? And nowadays, everybody hates it when you call them on the phone. Does anybody here love it when people call them on the phone? Just like your buddy and stuff like that?
I
Is it
do.
anybody? Yeah, okay. So a couple of us do, right? It's not going to be a universal rule, but like for the most part, I like to be able to support these non-synchronous ways of communicating. You know, schedule. A schedule is oftentimes your most effective communication tool, but like, you know, we use Discord, we use email to a way lesser extent, Slack, we use the schedule, the Kanban board of whatever flavor you like to use, to be able to tell people, hey, I got this done, or hey, I've got a question about this. I am very much of the school, did this need to be a meeting? Like, did we actually have to have a whole meeting where we pull in, you know, on a big team? Sometimes it's like 20 people in a meeting. I'm like, just do the math, man. How much are you paying these people an hour? Sometimes like up to 100 and something an hour for these people. And if they're sitting in this meeting and not really getting anything out of it and not really contributing anything to it, you're just sucking down $100 an hour. You got them sitting in meetings, dude, per person. That's exactly right. The table flipped. Meeting that could have been an email. I mean, this whole damn class could have been an email, right? No, just kidding. Yeah, I mean, asynchronous forms of communication are good. I think that synchronous forms of communication are good. I'm huge with having one-on-ones with my direct reports. I really enjoyed doing that. Roberto and I actually used to do that back in the day. We used to have one-on-ones from time to time to catch up, just see how each other are doing, especially in this day and age where everything's remote, right? So I hope that answers your question. I am sure there are other ways to go about doing that. We can also get into, I think at some point, talking about people who are not cooperative with the policies or systems on the team. And that's always a difficult subject, but we can definitely talk about it later.
I think the GDD will be covered by Tomo, right?
What are you talking about? Is there a question like what teacher is doing the GDD class, or like on a team who covers the GDD?
Yeah.
So let's talk about real quick. We'll do one more question. With the example of the monkey. Bye. See you later. We'll do this one last question before I got to get going because it's tax day here for me. With the example of the monkey, do you recommend to make a game design document with this details so the team needs to remember the specifications? Absolutely. That absolutely 100% needs to be captured in some sort of documentation so that everybody knows what was needed there. I would highly recommend, especially for stuff like art objects, that you have basically we call it a spec sheet, a specification sheet that that kind of goes over everything that anybody might need to know about that particular model, so that the game designers are communicating themselves accurately. Yeah, 100%. And who covers that? That should be the game designers. In some cases, helped out by production if they need somebody to help them generate a bunch of these really quickly. Yeah, and as you go on, you'll find out like everything that your team needs for those types of things. I'm sure there are some standard ones online somewhere that somebody's written up. But anyways, okay, everybody, take it easy. I gotta get going so I can get ready for my tax appointment. Thank you for coming to this class. I'm sure we're gonna have a lot more fun in the subsequent classes, and get those questions ready. Start thinking about production. Start thinking about your role as a person who's managing and leading a video game development team. All right. Take care.
Bye.
Gracias, Fernando.
Get better.
Bye-bye. See you.
Adiósito.
Muchas gracias.